Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm Trudy Stern, and I'm so happy to be with you again. In part one of my conversation with Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, we broke down one of the most misunderstood issues in U.S. Israel relations. Too often, people talk about the $3.8 billion in U.S. aid to Israel as if Israel is just another foreign recipient. But Ambassador Ettinger made it clear Israel is not a charity case. It's America's most valuable strategic partner. In fact, Israel spends that money back in the United States, and the benefits America receives are huge, from intelligence sharing, military innovation, counterterrorism, and technological breakthroughs far exceed the dollars exchanged. It is a powerful reminder that this relationship is not one-sided, but mutually essential. Today, in part two, we turn to another issue that is often very misunderstood: demographics. For years, we've heard warnings that Israel faces a demographic time bomb, that it cannot remain both Jewish and democratic because of its population trends. Ambassador Ettinger has spent decades studying the numbers, and his research tells a very different story. The reality is not only more balanced, but actually strengthens the case for Israel's future as a thriving Jewish state. I'm honored to welcome back Ambassador Yoram Ettinger as we dive into the demographic truth and what it means for Israel, the region, and the West. Welcome back, Ambassador.
Thank you. The honor is mine and the pleasure is mine.
So happy to have you back. But before we delve into the demographics of the region, I want to just turn to the current events of what happened just this week. Israel staged a targeted assassination, targeted bombing in Qatar. And it seems like it seems like there are a lot of results from that, including what is America's reaction and what is President Trump's reaction? How will that affect the hostages, the hostage release, and the deal that's on the table? Tell us what you know and tell us what you think.
Well, first of all, it's still premature, and Israeli intelligence is still exploring and investigating the outcome of the bombing. But irrespective of the outcome of the bombing, which aimed at the top leaders of Hamas, headquartered in Qatar, and those leaders determine literally the position of Hamas on the hostages, on Israel, as well as other issues. But irrespective of that, in my mind, this operation is another evidence to the unprecedented military cooperation between U.S. and Israel. There's no way that Israel would have carried out such an operation against Hamas headquarters in Qatar without prior coordination with the U.S. for a simple reason. There is a major U.S. military base in Qatar. Qatar is a very significant commercial partner of the United States, and President Trump's closest friends and even relatives have significant business interest involving Qatar. One needs to remember that Israel's relation with the U.S. military is based primarily on Israel relations, Israel cooperation with the U.S. military Central Command. Central Command is the U.S. command in charge of the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. The collaboration between Israel and the U.S. Central Command, headquartered in the Persian Gulf, has reached all-time high during the last 2 years of war between Israel, Hamas, Israel, Iran, Israel, Hezbollah, and Israel Houthis. And one should remember, or one should be aware, that that cooperation between the Israeli Defense Forces and the U.S. Military Central Command was initiated by President Trump during the last few days of his first term. One of the last things he did before exiting the White House in January of 2021 was realigning Israel away from the European Command towards the Central Middle East Persian Gulf Command. That enhanced tremendously the mutually beneficial cooperation, and that has provided the Central Command with the most important battle-tested laboratory for U.S.-owned units in the Persian Gulf and throughout the Middle East.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. Before you move on, just explain that a little bit more, because I don't really get that. What does that mean? He realigned Israel with that central command versus European. Could you explain that?
Until January 2021, Israel, for all the wrong reasons, was aligned with the U.S. European Command because at that time, American presidents, Secretary of State, such as President Obama, for instance, did not want so-called to embarrass the Arabs and align Israel with the Middle East and Persian Gulf American Military Command. And as a result, the cooperation between Israel and U.S. military was relatively minimal
No, but
because
nobody knows that. That is a very little known fact. I don't think most.
it was a game-changing decision by President Trump, which pulled Israel away from the European Command, which is almost irrelevant to Israel, almost irrelevant to U.S. Israel cooperation, and transferred Israel to the most relevant platform, namely the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. And the proof is in the pudding. Since that decision by President Trump was made, again, few days, literally few days before he concluded his first term, since that day, the level of collaboration between Israel and the U.S. military as a whole and U.S. military command in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East has bolstered beyond the wildest optimistic expectations for a simple reason. This is the home court of Israel, and Israel serves as a very unique battle-tested laboratory for the U.S. military units stationed in the Persian Gulf and throughout the Middle East. Israel has shared with those units its own battle experience, which have enhanced, upgraded the battle tactics of the American units. Israel provided an innovation center, so to speak, for the U.S. military units stationed in the Gulf. For instance, the urban warfare units, the counterterrorism units have frequented Israel more than any time before, studying the way Israel has conducted itself in Lebanon, in Judea, in Samaria, in Gaza, and taking away back to the Persian Gulf very, very vital lessons which have upgraded, improved significantly the battle tactics of the American units, which means upon next confrontation, that has produced less American fatalities, that has preempted a terrorist attack on Israel, and certainly the exchange of intelligence has reached all-time high. The medical units, American medical units stationed in the Gulf, stationed in Jordan, in Syria, in Iraq, have come to Israel to, to benefit from the unprecedented experience enjoyed, so to speak, or experienced by Israel during this current war against Hamas, which has involved more military medics than any time before, for a simple reason. We are now confronting a, a terror state, underground and overground, the most technologically advanced terror state, which has never been encountered by any Western military force. American military medics come to Israel. They study how have we reacted, and by the way, Israel has developed certain blood textures which have minimized the fatalities on the battle ground. Very high level of fatalities occurred at the time between the injury suffered by the soldiers and them reaching hospitals in Israel. The very special means developed by Israel as a result of our unique experience has brought down the number or the percentage of soldiers dying on the way to hospital to an all-time low, all-time low.
That's
This
unbelievable. That is incredible. It's all because of some new texture of blood that they've developed.
among other things, it also has to do with the fact that for the first time, the Israeli military has attached to even the smallest military unit a military medic. And by the way, we have had unprecedented number of female military medics involved in this underground and overground counterterrorism battles experienced by Israel. And again, we have shared all that with the US units. And while for some it may seem very odd, what does the US have to do with getting ready for underground warfare against terrorists? I would like to pay people's attention to the fact that the FBI, Homeland Security Department, and the Director of National Intelligence have specified in their 2025 threat assessment the fact that Iranian-controlled Islamic terror sleeper cells are already in the US. And to that, I would add what has been going on for a number of years, the Ayatollah regime supplying Mexico drug cartels equipment to construct underground tunnels from Mexico to the US, aiming to bring into the US both terrorists and drug traffickers. And again, this is done in a similar way that the Ayatollah regime has assisted Hamas terrorism in Gaza, constructing underground tunnels. And going back to the operation in Qatar, President Trump and certainly Secretary of State Mark Rubio, who is also the national security advisor to Trump, are very well aware that Israel has become the chief force multiplier, dollar multiplier for the United States, mostly defense-wise, but also commercially. And that also leads me to refer to some condemnation that we heard from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. I don't think that the president or Secretary Rubio are overly excited about condemnations uttered by the leaders of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And the reason is because they know very well the reality of Saudi and Emirati attitude towards Qatar. They know how to separate the very sweet talk exchange between the Saudis and the Emiratis with Qatar and the very rough walk. The Saudis and the Emiratis, and certainly the President and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, are aware that for Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, Qatar stands for an enemy, irrespective of diplomatic relations. They know that Qatar is a close ally of the Ayatollah regime in Iran, which is a clear and present lethal threat to every single Arab ally of the US. They also know that Qatar is the number one financial supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, which has its machete at the throat of Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and also aiming to bring the West and especially the USA to submission. So if one knows how to separate the very pro-Qatari Saudi and Emirati talk from the very confrontational Saudi and Emirati walk towards Qatar, one can then re-engage with reality. The president is aware of it, and therefore he does not frown upon Israeli operation against Hamas headquarters in Qatar. He understands that this is a thundering message to Qatar to desist from those tricky conduct where you can provide American universities with billions of dollars on the one hand, and then join forces with the Ayatollah regime, with the Muslim Brotherhood, attempting to topple every single ally of the US in the Middle East, and also expand terrorist cells on US soil.
So you believe that President Trump is completely aware of all of that and is very conscious of this complicated situation with Qatar. And even though it seems to us that possibly there is some good relation or some good feelings going on between President Trump as he says he was going to take that plane from Qatar. You believe he completely understands this complicated situation and is reacting accordingly.
Well, when it comes to completely, I have to consider some potential reservations, but I would say, in my mind, uh, a national security advisor to the president, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, is definitely aware of that. The CIA, uh, Ratliff, is aware of that. But most importantly, the U.S. Central Command in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf are definitely aware of it. And if I go back to the president's visit to the Persian Gulf few months ago, where he met with Central Command top officers, that time spent in the Gulf, in my mind, also produced a very realistic awakening by the president to Middle East reality, because that which he heard from the CENTCOM top military officers was very much the same messages he has heard frequently from Secretary or Minister for Strategic Affairs in Israel, former Ambassador Ron Dermer, and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And President Trump knows very well that the assessment he heard from CENTCOM in the Persian Gulf are not driven by politics, are not driven by pro or anti-Israeli lobby. They are driven by pure military considerations. And he heard from CENTCOM praises for the role played by Israel in bolstering the U.S. in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East.
That is a great analysis. And a lot of things that you brought up are things that I think the average individual isn't aware of. So that is fantastic analysis. Thank you so much for that. I have another question about that attack. Were the intended victims, the leaders of Hamas in Qatar, were they eliminated in your mind? Nothing really has been nothing really has been proven.
Well, the final outcome has not been published yet. On the one hand, you may say that if indeed the Israeli bombing missed the top Hamas leaders, then one would have expected them or one of them to appear on television raising his V sign for victory. We haven't seen that. And even if they were wounded, why not do it from hospital bed? But on the other hand, it's possible. It's possible if, and it's a big if their life has been salvaged, that they don't want Israel to know that they are alive, because they are very concerned that Israeli intelligence, Israeli Air Force is still looking for them, and they learned a very realistic lesson from the fate of Hezbollah terrorists, Houthi terrorists, and many other Hamas leaders. So we'll have to be patient and wait. But one clear outcome of the operation is the demonstration that the Israeli strategic arm goes well beyond the Israeli boundaries, well beyond the immediate boundaries of Israel. The Israeli strategic arms go over 1,000 miles, and that is one of the most effective messages for the US, because by being in the Middle East, we are extending the American strategic arm without the US adding a single American soldier, but trusting that Israel's ideology, Israel's strategy have been very consistent with the American ideology, American values, American strategy, and therefore, once again, we have proven that we are indeed the only, but the only proactive strategic ally that America has. No NATO country could have carried out the operations we carried out against Iran in June or against the Houthi terrorists. We have seen the British attempts to deal with the Houthis, to be quite honest, some American attempts, but none of them was as effective so far as the Israeli operation. And the US is aware that when it comes to Israel's extending the American strategic arm, unlike European allies, it doesn't depend on public opinion in Israel. It doesn't depend on left of center or right of center government in Israel as it does in Europe, where the alliance is very much conditional upon the ideology prevailing in the public or prevailing in the government. In Israel, whether you're left or right, whether you're conservative or liberal, religious or secular, it is common for Israelis to be ultra pro-Americans. And I would say that this proves how low risk or no risk is any investment in Israel compared to any other American investment anywhere in the world. American investment in NATO has not produced so far the NATO's willingness to flex muscle against Islamic terrorism. I'm not aware exactly what has U.S. Mega billion-dollar investment in Japan and South Korea in terms of military bases, in terms of tens of thousands of American soldiers. What exactly has it yielded for the US? But one can go on and on and on demonstrating what a great return on investment has the annual investment in Israel been. Sadly, this annual investment is being misperceived as foreign aid, while in fact it has been the most productive American investment ever in the area of national security.
And so, is it your belief that President Trump was okay with the attack in Qatar?
Well, first, as I mentioned before, I cannot conceive the notion that he was not in it before it was carried out, because Israel would not take a chance of bombing Hamas headquarters in Qatar while next door there is an American military base. And certainly the last thing that Israel wants is to have an aerial confrontation with American combat aircraft over the skies of Qatar. So the counter-terrorism operation by the Israeli Air Force in Qatar definitely had to be coordinated with Qatar. Why would the president say that he is not very pleased with that? Why would he be so supportive of Qatar? It's obvious. There are American interests in Qatar which have nothing to do with this operation. And once again, we're talking about walk versus talk. The American or President Trump's walk towards Israel has been the most productive of any American president going back to 1948 until today. The walk, I'll take any bad walk as long as I have such a very productive Trump walk. I'll take any unpleasant talk as long as I have such a productive walk.
That is unbelievably helpful. So once again, Yoram Ettinger, Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, you have really broken down some very, very interesting, but more important information for all of us to comprehend. I thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your perspective, your work, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in the future. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. And if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to any past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.